Do you ever feel like if you don't follow the rules, things could go off the rails? We're going to think about that today on Now at Devotions from Trinity, Lutheran, and Cyrus. Again, buy a train car in Starbucks. So I'm here at one of our local museums. We've got one of the train cars here on display here in Starbucks, and I'm thinking about this text we have for the week. We're in the book of Luke, it's chapter 13, and Jesus is dealing with some folks who are really frustrated with him because he's broken the rules. And this is a thing that happens a lot in churches. This is a thing that happens a lot in Christian groups. And it's this tension we have between commandments, rules, expectations, traditions, all of those things, and then the actual needs of people right now, right away, or the actual needs of a congregation or of a Christian community. And Jesus defaults right away and says, you got to watch out playing with the rules. And so we're going to think about that a little. So I was working with a family here just a couple weeks ago, and this family was sort of between churches, and at some point had a run-in with a more conservative Lutheran denomination, and said they had been excommunicated, which is actually a word that is really quite rare, not a thing that happens very often. And usually when you hear the word excommunicated, which means to be kicked out of a church, essentially, usually it has to do with rules, laws, commandments, expectations. Some expectation wasn't met, some argument happened, and instead of dealing with the people or the issue, what gets dealt with is, well, these are the rules, and these rules got broken, so then now you're out. And so this family was in need. They needed ministry. They lost a family member, and yet they're between congregations. And so they asked if I'd help, and I said, of course, yeah, sure, I'll do that. And it was tough. But the thing that struck me the most was the kind of pain this family had experienced with this so-called excommunication. And it gets you thinking, like, is there anything that can separate us from the love of God? Is there anything that can, oh wait, biblically, no, there isn't. Nothing can separate us from the love of God. Even the worst sinner or criminal or murderer or whatever have you is still beloved by God. God still knows their story. There aren't any disqualifiers there, and that's really hard. That's hard for me personally. I've worked with folks or been in situations where somebody has confessed something to me that was hard to deal with. I mean, yes, for the good order of a congregation or community, sometimes you do need to say, yeah, y'all need to leave. There's no way we can keep doing ministry here if there's this division around you or this big fight or argument. I mean, there's lots of situations like that. The pain that was caused there, and then the lack of pastoral care that was given was hard. And I think about that. Jesus, in this situation, in the book of Luke, he comes up to a woman and she is bent over in pain, some kind of an arthritic or physical body ailment that's got her bent over in half. And he says, woman, you're free. And she stands up straight. And the local preacher goes, hey, there are 6 other days where you can come and do your magic drama stuff. You are distracting us from church. It is the Sabbath. You need to knock it off. And Jesus says, what are you talking about? You guys lead your donkeys to water on the Sabbath day, that you don't want your animals to be suffering. Why can't I free this woman today? It's the same thing. We need to take care of people. And he's got a point. How do you deal with that tension in your life? That tension between the rules and laws and commandments, but then also exceptions or priorities. Right? Jesus doesn't deal with this as if it were just a set case. It is a person in a situation, and it demands a specific response. And that happens in our lives too, all the time. Using that discernment is hard. When do I forgive? When do I not? Sometimes you need to forgive, but sometimes people keep flouting that forgiveness and use it as a manipulation. When do you say, I love you, but I'm drawing a boundary? Right? That's a hard thing to consider. Or when do you say, I'm making an exception? That's a hard thing too. But Jesus always seems to default on the specific. He says, you know the commandments and you know the spirit of the commandments, but sometimes you miss the forest for the trees. I'm Pastor Chris here in Starbucks. I'm thinking about that. When is it right to break those rules and say, no, I have a different priority here, and my priority is love. By the way, that is often Jesus' priority, is grace and love. Very rarely does he come down on the side of judgment. And when he does, he says, yes, there is a judge, and it's me. And ultimately, we see what the product of his judgment is. The product of his judgment is he goes to the cross and says, I will take their sin, and I will forgive them. This is Pastor Chris, sitting by the railroad car, hoping your life stays on the tracks. Bye-bye for now.